about to listen to the Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders, for coders, about all aspects of life as a developer.
I'm Will, curmudgeonly experienced developer.
And I'm Beej, the optimistic newbie developer. Welcome to another episode of Complete Developer Podcast. We're doing something a little bit different this week. We have a guest host on with us. Lena Mills is a senior recruiter, and she's been recruiting for a little over 2 years and specializes in sourcing talent in the following areas: application and web development, business intelligence, database management, ERP integration and customization, programmer analysis, project management and business analysis, and systems integration. She's here to talk with us about the role of recruiters and how they work with developers to place devs in the right job. But before we get started, Will, what have you been fighting this week?
I have been having my deep regrets with path canonicalization in .NET. Yeah, so I'm writing this dinky little command line app to automate a couple things that I'm doing so that I can be lazy, as is kind of my standard. And what I'm having to do is, I've got a path in the system, and then there's a file sitting there that has relative paths in other places in the system. And you would think that you could say, okay, from this path, do this path operation and jump over from a location in the system. You would think that you could jump over to another path, with a relative path. But .NET kind of has some issues with that, and I'd actually dealt with that before and completely forgotten just how absolutely horrible it is. And so, yesterday, I was working on that for quite a while. I was writing a section of code that I was like, okay, this will take 30 seconds. And then 2 hours later, I'm going, this is horrible. Why isn't this fixed yet? And I eventually did get around the problem. But that's kind of my frustration this week is why is this as difficult as it is? Because it's not really a hard problem. But that's what I've been doing this week. It's been a pain point. How about you? Or how about Lena?
All right. Well, I don't really have any pain points to go over, but a couple of hot skill sets that I've actually been working on in Nashville would be an Oracle DBA role that I'm working on, and .NET. .NET is always huge in Nashville, so I'm sure you know that, Will.
Yeah, I'm aware.
What do you got for junior devs with 1 to 2 years experience?
Well, I will say that I don't work that much with junior developers. I'm always willing to help out and try to help out with any resume edits that I can help with or suggestions I can make to get into the market. But with what I do, I typically do have consulting level candidates that I work with, so going to be kind of the mid to senior level. Well,
that reminds me. I took some of the suggestions that you made for my resume and applied them to it, and then I showed it to a friend of ours that knows all about resumes. When I sent him my new one after the stuff that you told me, he was like, I don't know where you got these tips from, but they're phenomenal. It looks great. So, thank you.
That's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah. So, for me, I got my bike out this weekend.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I came down here on it. Will's been picking on me for not riding it in town, so I will say I have forgotten how much of a beating you take when you get up over about 55 miles an hour.
We fixed it with margaritas at this end, though.
Yes. Yes. Well, margaritas and lots of ibuprofen.
Yeah, not at the same time.
No, margaritas and then ibuprofen when I got home.
Yeah.
But I went up to my parents' house on Saturday and got my bike out of the garage and did some work on it, got it running, and then rode it down here because Will and I had an interesting meeting. We got to attend our very first Code Newbie Organizers meeting.
Yep.
Now, you guys have heard some of the ads that we put out. This episode is actually coming out the week after our first event. And so, with that...
So it's about time to roll the music.
That's right. something that's a little bit less IoT and more DIY. And for those that are not acronym savvy, that's less Internet of Things and more do-it-yourself. Though this project may help with future IoT projects, it in and of itself is not IoT.
Are you going to build a forge?
Yes, I am building a micro forge.
I don't think... if you ever do this, please let me come there, and see this, because my HOA is not going to allow this. So I just want to come there and drink beer and watch this. So
well, I live out in the middle of nowhere, so yeah. You come out, bring the beer, and I'll provide the rest of the materials. It's about $30. This was designed by Len Cullum. He's a woodworker out in Washington State that specializes in Japanese-style garden structures. And he came up with this when he needed to make some nails, like 500 specific type of Japanese nails. And he was like, I needed something to do a lot faster than just holding a torch on it.
Right. And the measurements are kind of odd because I actually know a little bit about Japanese measurement systems pre-Meiji Restoration. Mm-hmm. So I can understand.
Yes. And I didn't include the measurements for the forge because you can follow the link in the show notes. Great tutorial. So the hardware you'll need for this is a threaded rod, a fire brick, some nuts and bolts and washers, things like that, an aluminum plate, an aluminum angle, and some finishing nails. Like I said, he designed this forge for approximately 500 specialized nails for a project and ended up making over 1,000 within a few days. It can be used for just about any small forging needs, and the openings in the fire brick can be adjusted to your needs. So, a couple of disclaimers. Fire bricks are really soft. If you've not worked with them before, you can dig into them with your fingernail.
Yeah.
You should definitely drill slowly and wear a dust mask.
Right, because it's semi-corrosive dust, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that's correct. And so he's got it broken down into 7 fairly easy steps, and he has measurements and everything you need. Honestly, you could actually print this out and lay it over the fire brick and draw out what you need to do.
We need to do this.
Yeah,
we should totally do this. Let's do this in video. $30.
$30 to do this. Yeah. So, anybody talking to us this week?
No.
Oh, it looks like we do not have a comment to read on the show this week. Guys, you got to get out there and leave us a comment on iTunes. If we read it on the show, we'll send you some swag. I know the last comment we read, we sent her a wallet and a coffee mug.
Yeah, we're totally going to... when you have the username Bad Mother Coder, you got to have a wallet.
Yes.
You got to start quoting Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
Of course, if... this individual does that, that's going to be hilarious beyond belief. But, it might happen.
That's true.
Stranger things have.
So, Lena, welcome to the show. You've kind of put up with the two of us before. Now you get to see us in our natural environment in front of a microphone with beer.
I was going to say our natural environment is with beer. I'm not sure about the microphone, but...
Okay, so you see us in our natural environment with beer. I think the last time we hung out, we weren't drinking, were we?
No, because it was lunch break.
Yeah, I think we had lunch.
Yeah, we had lunch.
In Brentwood. Basil? I think we went to Basil.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
We did. It was very good sushi, too.
Yeah, because I just interviewed at a place.
Yeah.
That's right. So before we get started, Will, why is Lena here? And this is a bit odd for us to have another person in here.
Well, it is. So I've been doing software development for a long time. Not to show my age or anything. And
He's old, yo.
Yeah, there's a few gray hairs now. I have worked with a lot of developers that have got a pretty deep misunderstanding of the way recruiters work. And I'm sorry for everybody that I'm losing my voice. And I thought that it would be good to kind of have an episode that actually breaks down how all these pieces fit together, because I think a lot of developers are a little bit ignorant I've seen a lot of things where they've said things that have made it very clear that they don't really understand how recruiters work in the development ecosystem. And as a result, they have suboptimal results when they work with recruiters. They have unreasonable expectations when they work with recruiters. And they're also surprised by how things work out. And frankly, a lot of it comes down to a bit of an ignorance of the economics that actually make this thing work. Like, you can optimize the system if you know the input variables, but if you believe the variables are different than what's actually coming into the system, your optimization is always going to be wrong. So I thought it would be good to kind of put an episode together that actually puts this out and says, here's how this actually works.
Yeah, and we brought Lena in because, well, she's such a great recruiter that she's in the process of recruiting me to come and be a recruiter.
So it's like meta recruiting.
Yes. She is so good, she's a meta recruiter.
Put that on the business card.
There you go.
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah. She's the only recruiter I work with.
She's the only recruiter that Will works
that.
with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the reasons, that works out pretty well.
To start off, let's talk about the recruiting process.
Okay, absolutely. So where I work, we have both people that are recruiters and work specifically with the candidates, and we have people that work specifically with the clients. So sometimes you can run what is called a full desk, and you can do both sides of it, but what we found to be easier is actually having somebody focus specifically on each side. So my account managers have companies that they target in the Nashville area. And so they set a goal of how many companies that they want to set a close relationship with. And what's important to them is actually getting that close relationship and that longevity with dealing with that company. And recruiters try to keep what we call a matrix of candidates that we work with. And so that could be from recruiting for a specific job opportunity or recruiting for a position or just positions that we know that we get often. And so the way that I go about my recruiting is, we do have a database that I work with, but also I do a lot of recruiting on LinkedIn. I do a lot of recruiting on the job boards such as Dice and Career Builder. But a lot of my business comes from actual referrals, which, BJ, that's how I got to know you, is through Will referring you. So that can be huge, definitely in what we do to recruit, and also networking events, which the junior developers that you brought up earlier, one of my biggest tips for them is to go to networking events because that's huge. A lot of times, obviously, as a staffing agency, we are typically working with mid to senior level positions and trying to get consultants out on positions. So I would say definitely going to networking events and meeting with different candidates, different companies. That is definitely really helpful.
Kind of what is the path to placement? Like, from a company saying, like the company where Will works. Mm-hmm. Like he is now full-time there. He started off as a contractor. So when they had the position open, how does that process kind of work?
Well, typically, sometimes my account managers will see a job posted online, just like an ad posted. They'll call on that, and I think that's kind of how this happened. My account manager saw that there was an ad posted for a senior developer. I knew that Will was looking, and so I sent that information over to her and said, hey, try to see if they're interested in Will. And so she called them. She said something a little bit about his information. What I will say as far as working with multiple recruiters or one recruiter, you have to keep a spreadsheet of who all you're working with, where you've been presented, what positions you've been submitted to or interviewed with. Because if I submitted Will and he had already been presented, he might look stupid, I might look stupid. So we typically, I never tell someone not to work with multiple agencies or multiple recruiters. I just always say that it's a good idea to keep track of everything. And
that's the reason I only work with one is, it's like you find a good person and then you don't keep a spreadsheet.
Yeah,
it makes
I consider
easier.
Laziness a virtue.
I'm actually glad you brought this up because this is something that I wanted to ask about working with multiple recruiters. I know Will, as a senior dev, he prefers to only work with you for multiple reasons. He's lazy and he doesn't want to have to deal with keeping up with that spreadsheet.
Well, and if you've got one competent person, you don't want competition in that space. It's also easier on the recruiter. Like, they know that, hey, you've got my full focus, not, there's 8 people that have my full focus.
Yeah.
I guess that like the economy of that situation doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
What
I
I'm
would rather
thinking,
just have one.
What I'm wondering here is that works out really well for you as a senior dev with experience, but we do have a lot of junior developers that listen to the show. So what would you say to them about working with multiple recruiters or working with recruiters?
Well, I would say, I know when you're first trying to get into the market, I don't think it hurts to try to work with multiple recruiters. I definitely do think it's important to find somebody that you feel comfortable working with, you feel like you can trust, that you don't feel is trying to just find leads from you and trying to just find out things about where you're interviewing. I think it's really important to find somebody that wants to give you advice, help you edit your resume, try to help you find tips. If they don't have a position for you, maybe they can refer you to somebody else, either within their company or something like that, to kind of help you find other things as well.
And I would add, as a senior developer, the thing that I see is that commodity products have advertisers and luxury products have agents. And so at some level in there, you want to make that transition, because otherwise you get limited and it just sucks having to keep a spreadsheet. I think I made that jump probably 4 or 5 years in. And so like at the junior level, you kind of do have to play the field a little bit, but
I guess that's what I was getting at was, should junior developers play the field?
I don't think that's a bad idea. Like I said, I would never tell anybody not to use multiple agencies. I mean, the one thing that I do is I work in a very specific division with my company, and so if I find a developer that I want to work with, then I try to invite other recruiters from inside my agency to meet them, because I want to get them in front of as many opportunities as possible. So I never would say it's a bad idea to get in front of as many opportunities as you can. But so as a junior developer, if you're just getting into the market, then try to saturate the market as much as you can. Once you've gotten a little bit more experience, then you can definitely try to maintain that relationship with somebody if you've gotten a recruiter that you trust. Definitely, I would say network as much as you can, saturate the market.
well, and that helps you actually find the person that you trust too, because when you're first starting out, you don't really have very good heuristics. Like, I get calls from recruiters. Like, I can always tell when HCA is hiring, because my office mate and I both get like 5 or 6 phone calls in a day. And I mean, like, we both turn our phones off. It's like our wives can't call us because the phones are off. And we can tell based on, if we actually pick up and talk to the people, like, we've got enough experience now that we can tell who's probably got a feel for the market and who doesn't. Like, the guy that calls and goes, "Oh, I see you do JavaScript, so we have an enterprise Java position available," and it's like, you don't understand the market at all, dude. That painfully acquired knowledge doesn't happen really until you actually like go through it. You're almost going to have to kind of play the field a little bit just to have enough experience with different recruiters to be able to figure out who's got their head in the game. And then when you get to the mid-level or above, that's when you go, okay, I'm going to get one recruiter I work with and go from there. And part of that is your maturity and understanding how the whole situation works, and part of it also is the fact that, hey, look, I need to have somebody that's actually focused.
That is one thing. Whenever I interview somebody that is more mid to senior level, if I can gain their trust and let them know that I do want to work for them and help them find a role, then what I'll tell them is, where would you like to work? And I'm not just trying to pry for leads, because obviously they don't know if a position is open within that company. But if they tell me where they're looking to go, then I can see if we have an in with that company. I can see if we know somebody and if we're able to place them that way. One thing that I've heard Will say before is that that devs can't consider themselves the client. Mm-hmm. But I would say that I still consider developers my client just as much as my account managers consider the company their client. While, I mean, obviously the company is paying for the talent, and at the end of the day, they are going to be footing the bill for that. But also, my candidates have to be happy. So that's why one thing, like, I try to discuss the industry that they want to be in and things like that, because at the end of the day, if the candidate's not happy, I mean, they may leave, they may go to another job. If I haven't tried hard enough to make them happy in the role that they're in, then they may think that I'm not working for them, and they may not trust me and tell me, like, hey, I'm gonna leave without a notice or something like that, and then nobody's happy. So I still consider the candidate the client just as much as the company.
Like the way I've said it is the developer is the product, not the customer. And a lot of that really goes down to the developer's mindset around the things, because I'll hear people talk about Facebook and they'll say, "Oh, well, if you're on Facebook, you're not the client, you're the product." It's like, well, I understand when I'm in a recruiting situation that I am the product. Like my skills are what is getting sold here, and so I need to. It's not so much a thing of negativity towards the recruiter as in it's a thing of I need to shift my mindset to I'm a product owner and I want to get this out to clients. Mm-hmm. Versus I'm the client and things are just going to magically happen. It's proactive marketing.
It really is.
Absolutely.
And you're not selling people. You're not selling a developer. You're selling...
We don't do that anymore.
Yeah. You're selling a developer's skill. So Will has a certain skill set, and it's those skills, that ability that is being sold to the client. It's not Will that's the product, it's Will's skill set. So Will is an end unto himself, to get philosophical. But
in all fairness, I recognize that the clients that I work with are making money because I bring a skill set to the table, and they're paying for that, but they're making money over that. And I recognize that those are the pieces in the relationship, and I recognize where I am in that relationship so I can optimize. We talked about if you don't know the inputs to the function, you can't optimize the outputs.
Yes, exactly.
There it is.
So what is a typical day like for a recruiter?
What we do is we meet in the morning and we set goals about what we're going to try to do. It depends on what positions that I'm working on that day. And so I do set a goal of how many calls that I want to make that day, but also it kind of depends on the position that I'm working on. So I may jump to making a lot of calls that day. I may jump to LinkedIn. I may go to different job boards, Dice, Career Builder. But then I'm also trying to meet people, whether that is on Skype as far as a video interview, or if I'm taking somebody like you guys out to lunch, or if I'm meeting somebody for coffee. So typically I try to line my mornings up with phone calls, and then I try to line the afternoon up with meeting people that I've already talked to. I've already talked to on the phone about their skill set, about what they're looking for specifically in their ideal next position. And then actually meeting with them in the afternoon, because we do try to meet with all of our candidates. I say we try to. We do meet with all of our candidates before we submit them to a client, before we try to get an interview set up, because that's something that we promise to our clients, the quality of who we're meeting with, and trying to make sure that we're sending them the best candidates for the positions they offer.
Well, and that's also good for the clients.
Yeah,
not for the clients, but for the developer end too, because you can kind of gauge whether their personality is going to fit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing, when candidates feel like they don't have time to meet with a recruiter, I tell them, I want to meet you so that I can I can tell my client that I've met with this person, I like this person, I think they'd be a good fit. But I also ask them, don't you want to know who's representing you in the Nashville market? Don't you want to see the person that is talking about your skill set and introducing you to clients?
Yeah, and that's kind of where I come at it from is the whole marketing angle. Like, I do want to know who's actually representing me and have an idea of where they're coming from, and make sure that they are actually presenting me to the client in the way that makes sense.
When you matched Will at his current job, one, it's hilarious because he walked into the interview and one of our best friends
sat down across from me and goes, "So I'm interviewing you." And I said, "Well, this is awkward."
But, and we actually placed Ben as well.
Yeah. I know. Oh, he shall not be named. We never got his permission.
We did get his permission to say his name.
Okay, so we can say his name is Ben. Okay,
yeah. It's just funnier to say he who shall not be named.
Yeah, like he's Voldemort or something.
Though, of course,
wait, you don't say that name.
We have said she who shall not be named name, which is Bethany Adams. If you guys have not had the chance, check out her book Soulbound. It's on Amazon Kindle, and you can buy it in paperback. The reason he was able to find such a great fit is because you knew him well enough to say, "Hey, you'll fit with this company."
Well, and it's a typical sales funnel thing, right? Like, as a developer, I want to make sure that when I go to an interview that there's actually a conversion, because I don't want to have to put a tie on for somebody that's not going to hire me. And, to the degree possible that I could make that happen.
I saw our audio guru, Jason, today. They're saying junior developer, but they want 3 to 5 years experience. They don't want a junior developer.
Right.
They want a mid-level developer they can pay at a junior rate, and they're not going to hire me. And so there's no point in wasting my time, wasting their time.
Wasting the recruiter's time.
Wasting the recruiter's time. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I just tell people if it's more than what experience level I have, don't try to push me because it's not going to work. It hasn't yet. And so there's no point in really fighting it.
I agree. And that's one thing that I would say that I have seen, I've heard from other developers that when you said that you asked them not to submit you, I think that's good that you go ahead and let them know your expectations, because I try to let...
But they already submitted you, promise.
Well, and see, that's where I was going with this, is that what I've started telling this to developers in interviews, because I think the developers have gotten jaded by that they know that if they send their resume, then it's going to be sent to who knows where. And so that's what I tell them from the get-go, is the way that I market my candidates is first name. Unless you have a very, very unique name that might get recognized, I do the first name. I do a few bullet points about the experience, and then that's what we send just to market. If someone's immediately available or if they're actively looking, and we, of course, if they're currently employed, we make sure not to send that to their current employer, obviously. But that's all that we send. When we send that out to market, that's all we send. And then if we get a bite, if we get somebody to say, hey, I'm interested, can you send me their resume? That's when I call my candidate and I say, hey, I've got this company. I tell them the name of the company to make sure that they haven't already been submitted, because not only did they look bad if they're double submitted, a lot of companies will just... It
makes you look desperate.
Yeah, a lot of companies will completely disregard a submission if they've gotten it from more than one recruiting agency, and so we try to avoid that.
Yeah, and I've actually had this experience where early in my career, I got submitted by, I think, 2 or 3 different people to the same place. And they said, okay, well, we're just not going to consider it. We're just not going to consider it at all, because we don't know even which recruiter is getting paid at this point, because they all 3 put your resume in within the space of an hour or something. It's like, well, who gets that?
That's why the spreadsheets are important too. If you're working with multiple agencies at that point.
I didn't tell any of them to do it.
Yeah, and that's another reason, because not only, we're not just looking out for ourselves. We want to get you guys jobs, but, it makes us look bad. It makes the developer look bad, and then the client may not want to work with that developer. They may not want to work with us. So that's a really important thing that I try to stress to candidates is just let me know where you're interviewing, because I don't want to get in the process with you. If another agency has already presented you, and you get that job, then, that's great. You get a job. Maybe we'll work together in the future. Maybe we'll get referrals. Maybe I'll just take you out to lunch because it was great getting to know you. But that's something that I think is very important, is keeping track of that and trying to, that is one advantage to working with one recruiter. But yeah, that's one thing I would say is if you're working with a good recruiter, they will not send your resume or your full name or your contact information until they've asked you if it's okay.
So, one thing that I think a lot of us developers tend to struggle with and not understand is how recruiters get paid. I know when I was interviewing for a recruiter position, that was one of my curiosities, more because I just wanted to know how the system works.
Well, and I think you and I both have had the developer semi-non-disclosure agreement view of the whole thing, but Lena's actually had the real non-disclosure agreement version of the thing. So,
in general, how does the pay structure and how does that all work, I guess?
Well, definitely with, like I said before, with working with mid to senior level developers, we are working with consultants. So we are sending these consultants out, and the clients know that there's a higher cost with those. So obviously there is some incentive for us to place people. There's a high incentive, not just the pleasure of finding someone a job, but that is our job. We're not just paid to just make cold calls all day long. We actually, that is how we get paid, is by placing candidates.
Okay, so what you're saying is, on the developer end, we just get an onslaught of calls from a bunch of different recruiters. And so to us, it appears like, all right, well, recruiters get paid to make phone calls, like a call center. But what you're saying is that's not how it works.
I get nothing for just making the calls, aside from, networking, which is important to me. I want to reach out to as many people as I can. What we do, we place candidates, and that is how we make our money. When we place candidates, one of the appeals, as far as me working with contract and contract to hire positions, is the clients get a higher level of candidate that they get to work with. And through that, they don't have to pay a lot of the costs that you would to hire a full-time employee. So that helps them, that benefits them in a lot of ways. But one thing that we do is we're going to pay candidates for what they work no matter what. So when we do place a candidate, if it ends up not working out, what we have is called a working interview. I've done this with Will multiple times. I don't think we've ever had to do a refund on him. He's done a great job every time. But if things don't work out well, then we're not going to bill our client. And that could be either by the candidate saying, I wasn't satisfied with this position, or the client saying, I wasn't satisfied with the candidate that was placed. But we're always going to pay candidates for the work done, so it really doesn't cost a candidate anything to work with a recruiter. It may cost you 10 minutes to chat with me on the phone, but it's not going to cost you any money to come work with a recruiter.
Yeah, this is I've had discussions with developers that don't seem to get that, like, this is how the financials work. Which is very strange to me, like the mindset that they think that, okay, I've got to pay the recruiter to find me work. And it's like, they're not really an ad agency. They're getting they're almost like commission sales.
That's a really great way to look at it, because
the economics work about the same. The way I've always looked at it is, if I'm in the contract to hire phase, I'm an employee of the recruiting company, working on behalf of the client, and then when I get converted to being an employee of the client.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
That's not quite dead on, probably in all cases, but it's close enough for government work, as we like to say.
What you're saying is the developer gets paid, like their pay plus their benefits, all that comes out first.
Yes. When I interview a candidate, rather than telling them specifically what a client is looking to pay, I ask them, what are you looking for? As far as if you're on a contract, what hourly rate are you looking for? If you're looking for a full-time position, what salary are you looking for? And that's what we start with. Now, if I find a position for them that's not in that range, then I'll let them know. I'll say, look, here's the description of the position. And if it's something that you're interested in, I can see if we can negotiate with the client. But that's the first thing that I always ask is what are you looking for as far as compensation? What do you need?
That makes perfect sense. I know don't hate me for this, Lena. I had a conversation earlier today about a position that they were wanting to pay just a little bit under what I'm asking for. I mean, like within my personal range of I would work for that.
Well, one thing that I do ask is, what's the minimum that you're looking for? And I don't ask that so that I can pay the minimum that you're looking for. The reason that I ask that is I don't want to annoy you with calls that are lower than what you would take. So
and it makes it easier to negotiate your pay rate as well too, because they can go, look, he's not going to go above the midpoint of his pay range.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to pester you. Yeah, I don't want to pester someone with calls about a position that is just honestly below what they are willing to take.
Oh yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I know I had a friend of mine I was talking to the other day said that he's had several recruiters call him and say, well, if you're willing to take a pay cut by a significant amount of what he's asking for, and he's asking for like mid-range for junior developer in his area. I don't want to give specific numbers because they vary between areas, but he's asking for right at the mid-range and willing to negotiate. But this was like significantly lower. This is lower than what he is making as a blue-collar worker, not in development, like below that. And he's like, no, like if I'm going to leave the job I have, it has to at least pay more to do this.
Yeah. And if it's who I'm thinking about, like if he does decide to go at a lower rate, I could totally outsource to him some things.
Yeah, well, if he does do that, I'll kick him in the knee.
Yeah, so will I.
Yeah.
But,
he's a good friend of ours, and so we can say that. But yeah. No, and that's I appreciate that. You're not the only one that I talk to that does that. One thing that frustrates me, I get probably 5 to 10 emails a day about senior dev positions or positions that they say they're looking for a junior dev, and then it's 5 to 10 years experience.
Yeah.
And
or
I'm like,
you have to have worked with VB4 and SQL Server 6.5 because we're still running that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and
I get those too.
So this is one of those things that's frustrating for developers is there's recruiters like you that really put the effort into getting to know your developers and to placing the right people at the right job. But then you have those other, I would say other agencies, really, because I haven't had anybody from the particular one you work at ever contact me like this.
Well, I can speak to this. That, like, it's that whole conversion funnel with sales. Like, you either have a narrow funnel that's like, okay, I'm targeting my sales to this group of people, and I'm going to make sure that most of the cohort goes through, or I'm going to target it to everybody and then maybe get 0.01%. Mm-hmm. And you get the spam from those.
I will say, working in the staffing industry, just in my personal experience, when I'm recruiting on a certain position, I may not have time to look through every single specific bullet point of a resume. And so I may end up, and also a lot of the things within our database are not completely updated. So I may have a resume that's 5 years old because developers have avoided chatting with the recruiters. And so I may be calling you about a job you were qualified for 10 years ago, or vice versa, what you were talking about earlier, BJ, with being called about senior level positions. That's something that I do think it would be beneficial to get to know the recruiters a little bit better. And just send them an email back, rather than just ignoring the email or something. Just send them an email back and let them know, like, hey, I'm actually not qualified for this position. Maybe can you put a few notes in my file or something like that? And I think that helps a lot.
Okay, good. Because I say good because personally, that's something I've done. Like when I
can see that with you. I can definitely see you doing that.
Before we jump too far, you're talking about the spam emails. I never block sender.
Okay, why is that?
Because it's good intel. I'm not going to call them, but I can see what jobs are available. Most of the time, the recruiters that are extremely sloppy and that are carpet bombing the whole community, you can actually figure out, okay, like, who is their target? And then you go to your recruiter. If it's like somebody that you want to work with, you can actually go to your recruiter and go, hey, I know they have a position open because I did the research. Here you go. Like, get me in there.
That's a good point. And personally, I don't block sender as much as spam them. Like, I'll be spam, and then once a week I check my spam filter.
I don't even do that because I don't want bounce back rates to show up or anything like that. Like I'm like, okay, if they're being annoying, like the difference between a pile of poo and fertilizer is how far you spread it out.
Don't crucify a recruiter if they send you the wrong thing. A lot of times they will. Well, I'm sure I've emailed you when I had you.
Suck sometimes too. Like I've seen stuff that has come out, and it's very obvious. It's like, okay, somebody did a like search and they said, where skill set contains something like Java, and it's going to pick up JavaScript.
One of my favorite jokes that I've heard from a developer was, Java is to JavaScript as car is to carpet.
And I like that.
I think that's a really good one, and that is something that comes up.
In fact, let's put that on Twitter right now.
Jason, if you see that statement is for you. So, Lena, as a recruiter, what do you face that devs tend to not understand about recruiting? Like, if you could tell every developer you work with or you talk to a couple of things about recruiting that they just don't know, what would you say to them?
I would say have patience. I mean, as you guys have mentioned, a lot of times you're going to get emails when the job is not 100% tailored to you. And like I said before, sometimes I can't go through every bullet point on a resume. So I would just say have patience. Don't let your temper get into your responses to emails. If you're really frustrated, don't respond to the email or hold on to it for a few days. So I would say just, because a lot of times you may be dealing with a new recruiter. And so maybe you may want to not respond to them. And once they've gotten some more tenure in the company that they're working in and they got more experience in staffing or in recruiting in general, maybe then you want to work with them. But if it's the first week that they've been working, they're going to accidentally ping a brand new developer with a senior job or a architect with a mid-level job that's paying $20K less than they want to look at. So I would just say have patience. I would say that's the biggest thing.
And can I add something to this? If you're a senior dev and they ping you with a junior dev job, that's called opportunity, because you probably know somebody that's trying to move up through the ranks and you can place them. And I know some places pay for that very information. Like, that information is not without value, so don't treat it like it's garbage. Like, if it's somebody that you trust.
What about from the other end? Like, as a junior dev, what I've seen is I get a lot of...
Well, you know senior devs.
I know a lot of senior devs, but every senior
dev... And if you know one that's looking...
I don't know any that are looking.
But when you find one that's looking...
Keep that contact information, because that's when you can get a referral bonus. If I wasn't already working with Will and you found out that he was looking and you sent his information to me, maybe I wasn't able to place you because you were on that junior end. Hopefully I gave you some good tips.
Yeah.
But if I wasn't able to place you, you send his information to me and I'm able to place him.
That money buys a lot of ramen noodles.
A lot of companies, a lot of companies do pay a referral bonus. So that's definitely an incentive. If it's not the certain level that you're looking for, that's another thing I say, have patience. And a lot of times, if I do send out an email blast that is widespread, then I typically include in there, please keep in mind, we give referral bonuses. Like, that's one thing I try to keep in there. So, like, if this doesn't fit you exactly, maybe you know somebody in your network that would be a good fit.
Personally, when I see an email that has something that says that specific thing, like, hey, this may not be for you, but if you have a referral, we do give bonuses. To me, that says, okay, this is worth my time reading, because if I know somebody, I can still get something out of it.
Another point to that is what if that email blast, or what if a different email hit one of your friends and wasn't going to fit for them, but it might be a good fit for you, and they refer you. Yeah. So you never know who that's going to hit, who might be a good fit for that.
Well,
that's a good point.
And the pay rate for some of those can be a little bit obscene anyway, because like I've had developer contacts, that I have helped hook up through the company that you're working through, I think, or it was a different company here in town, and I spent 15 minutes on the email because it was, hey, a friend of mine just called me and he got fired, and like 15 minutes later I get an email from a recruiter, and so I sent a quick email. It's like I spent like 4 minutes writing an email that netted me $1,500.
Yeah, coming from the guy
if you're willing to walk away from that pay rate, like punch that into a calculator for a minute and realize you've got to be Bill Gates to walk away from that. So look at these as things that are actually have value versus annoyances, and it will shift your perspective in a way that is actually effective.
Well, and I will say, as a recruiter, that's one reason I never want to turn away a junior developer that may not have experience for any of the positions that I'm working on, but if we develop a good relationship, who knows where you will be in a few years? Who knows who you might know? Who knows how I might be able to help you? And what tips I can give you that may get you a job not through my company, but might get you a job through another company that you apply directly and your resume looks better because of what I've given you. And then I feel like those relationships that you make, they help you in the market. They help you with other candidates that you may or may not have met. And I think that building relationships is the number one thing, and that's the top tip that I do give to junior developers or senior developers. Just network. I think that's the biggest thing.
Well, and that's something we push on the podcast a lot. Most really developers really screw this up.
One thing that brings up for me is a lot of people don't see the value in that. It's like if all you're looking at is the bottom line, that increases your bottom line. It's a long-term game.
I totally agree. And that's one thing I don't like to look at cold calling recruits or searching on LinkedIn or searching on job boards as how is this candidate going to get placed and make me money? I like to think, how am I going to get this relationship going to where we can both have a benefit? So how can it be a win-win-win for the candidate, for my company and myself, and for the client? That's what I think is the most important, is finding a win-win-win.
And I think that that's something that people don't even realize is possible. It's like a lot of people get into that mindset of there is a winner and a loser, when really, in this situation, there can be a triple winner.
Well, if you have a sustainable business model, there's at least two winners.
Yeah, the customer and the business.
Yeah, at least two. And
at least,
maybe more than that. But
depending on your business model, the people that you work with as a business,
right,
who you are their customers, so there's one, possibly multiple levels back.
Yeah, and that's kind of a defining underlying feature of successful business models, is that you have multiple winners in the situation and you don't have losers, because what happens when people are losing out is they drop out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's what we don't want. I mean, we want to keep, unless you have just made it to the end and you're retiring, and I'm so happy for you if you're at that point. But I would just say that, I mean, we don't want to lose good developers. We want to keep them in the Nashville market. We want to help them grow. And that's one of the most satisfying things about my job. I would say I've got a handful of developers that I've got a relationship like I do with Will, where I just know if I hadn't recently placed you at a place where I hope that you're happy with for a very, very long time, then that's somebody I would call up and say, as soon as I get a position, I call up the people that I have top of mind or that I've interviewed recently. And that's one thing that I don't think that developers understand when I'm trying to get them to meet with me. Is if I don't already have a position that they're like excited about and ready to go for, I think that's the problem, that they don't want to actually meet with me. And I tell them, look, when I get new positions, I work contract and contract to hire. My positions move very quickly. If I haven't already met with you, then you're not going to be my first call. My first call is going to be somebody that I've already met with, somebody that I'm already comfortable with, and somebody I can present immediately, because my clients are trying to move quickly.
Right. You want a warm lead.
Absolutely.
We had this discussion about how sales works.
Mm-hmm.
And, that kind of ties into this whole thing, is you've got to understand how the sales cycle works at a recruiting level to be able to get recruited.
As a developer, what you want is to build that relationship with a recruiter or several recruiters, so that when a position comes up, they know
you're top of mind. Yeah, and you may have more than one recruiter you trust. You may have 5. You may have 10. Honestly, as long as you have the rapport with them and you know that they're not just going to send your full resume without any questions asked, as long as you can trust that, then I would say it doesn't matter how many you're working with. I love that Will likes to work exclusively with me. I think that's great. But, I mean, it depends on the rapport that you have with a recruiter. And I think that once you have that relationship, they want to work harder to find you a position.
I would completely agree with that.
Well, they're going to get pinpoint accuracy with picking up the position for you. And what that does is that actually raises your rates.
Yeah.
Because you're a good fit versus being a warm body.
Exactly. And I have about 3 or 4 that I work with that, I get emails from, probably 10 to 15 emails a week from recruiters. There's about 3 or 4 that I trust because I've met with them, I've talked to them, they're local for one, and I know they understand, hey, this is the level of experience I have, this is my knowledge base, which doesn't always match. And I have several friends that are at my level, junior developers, that our knowledge base is well above our experience level because we've done a lot of private solo work, a lot of training, but haven't gotten a lot of on-the-job experience.
And from my experience, I would say if you haven't had the on-the-job experience, or if you don't have the computer science degree, then if you have that outside of the professional experience, if you have that, then you do need a recruiter that kind of understands that and is willing to go to bat and to their clients and say, hey, you know what, just get on the phone with them. Just have a phone conversation with this candidate, and I guarantee you'll like them. So that is one case where I would say, rather than throwing your resume at 15 different recruiters, maybe you want to get 2 or 3 that actually understand what experience you have. Maybe send them examples of projects. One tip that I gave BJ is he had more of a sales B2B as his most recent position, and he was looking for a developer position. So I told him, put the B2B sales towards the bottom and put this podcast, put what you've done for Will as your experience. Just add that experience to your resume. You can specify that it's not a professional position or something like that, but put projects on your resume. Put what you've actually done on your resume, and maybe provide links to that.
Well, and they call me periodically, and I have to step downstairs at work. And I've had that conversation with a couple of recruiters now where they're like, okay, now what did he do? And I have to go through the explanation of, I took him on as not really an intern, but more of an apprentice. And I did not shield him from any complexity. I get into some pretty arcane, random crap sometimes, and he's in the middle of it.
I've actually used your LinkedIn recommendation of him before.
Well, I put that out there to try to avoid the phone calls, right?
Hey, you know what? It's funny because I actually took that recommendation and copied it over to a Word file, and whenever anyone asks me, do you have any more information? I send them that recommendation. No. So, speaking of LinkedIn, we're about to hit the end of the show. How can people reach out to you?
I would love for people to reach out to me on LinkedIn. You should be able to find me pretty easily. I don't think Lena's that common of a name, but you can find me on LinkedIn, Lena Mills. And I'm connected with Will. I'm connected with BJ.
And shoot either of us a message if you need to get a hold of her, because
we'll include a link to her profile in the show notes.
I would love to help anybody, any developers, even if you're a junior developer and I don't have a position for you. I've worked with BJ, and I have helped him with a few interviews. Things have been going pretty well lately, it seems like. But even if I don't have a position for you, I would definitely love any tips that I can give you. I would love to network, so absolutely would love to connect with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I would even say, even if you're not in the Nashville area, though most of our listeners are, if you're not, connect with Lena, because she may know somebody in your area that she can connect you with, and you can work with them. So check out the show notes. There will be a link to Lena's profile on LinkedIn. You can also like us at our page on LinkedIn, or follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod, where we quoted Lena on a few things from this episode. Well, that about wraps us up for the episode. Will, before we close out, what do you have for us this week for Tricks of the Trade?
Well, touching on, kind of what we talked about with the whole recruiting thing, is sort of the idea of knowing your topology. One of the things I've seen a lot with the way developers interact with recruiters is they don't know how the money comes in. and they don't know how the money gets back out and gets to them. They just know their little cell that they're working in. Is know the topology of the system that you're working in. For instance, if you're working in a very sales-focused organization, you need to understand how the money actually comes into your position and be able to work within that context as opposed to being completely isolated. It's the same deal with manufacturing. It's the same deal with any number of other setups. Like, you need to be able to figure out the larger scope of things outside of your development career and figure out how that money is actually coming in, how the system is working around what you're doing. It's very easy to get a narrow scope of focus and be massively incorrect about how things actually work. So just step back from your position a little bit at some point and figure out how the pieces fit together, because that's one thing we notice a lot with recruiting. That's one thing we notice a lot with developers' interactions with sales. This is pretty much a drum that we've been beating since the beginning of this podcast. And so know your topology, know how the pieces fit around you as opposed to just the piece that you're in. And so that's my little very short opinion piece on the whole thing. So that's what I got. We got a long episode anyway.
Stand by for Titanfall.
If you have a question or comment for us, please email us at neckbeards@completedeveloperpodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed under Creative Commons. The intro music for IoTs is Hillbilly Hip Hop by Jason Belcher. For references, show notes, and to sign up to our email list, be sure and check out the website at completedeveloperpodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod and like our page on Facebook to keep up with the news about the show. Thanks for listening. See you next time.